The fifth-round pick who fell from potential second overall selection all the way to pick number 146 just watched his entire future get thrown into absolute chaos. And Cleveland Browns owner Jimmy Haslam is at the center of a quarterback controversy that could define not just Shedeur Sanders' career, but the next decade of Browns football. Behind closed doors in Berea, Ohio, decisions are being made right now that will shock the NFL world, and insiders are already whispering that the son of Deion Sanders might have just played his last meaningful snap in a Browns uniform. This isn't speculation anymore. This is happening, and it's happening fast. Before we break down this absolute bombshell, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this Shedeur Sanders situation is developing by the hour, and you need to stay updated on every single twist in what might be the most dramatic quarterback saga in Browns history. Let's take you back to April 2025, the NFL Draft, when Shedeur Sanders' entire world came crashing down in front of millions watching around the globe. Sanders entered that draft as one of the most hyped quarterback prospects in years, the son of NFL legend and Colorado head coach Deion Sanders, a player who some analysts had projected to go as high as the second overall pick. He had just come off leading Colorado to national relevance, throwing for over 3,700 yards and 37 touchdowns in his final college season, showcasing the arm talent, pocket presence, and leadership that NFL teams desperately crave. Mock drafts had him going to quarterback-desperate franchises in the top 5. His social media following was massive. The hype was real. And then the draft started, and everything fell apart. Pick after pick went by without Sanders' name being called. The whispers started immediately. Reports emerged that Sanders had deliberately tanked interviews with teams he didn't want to play for, that his personality rubbed scouts the wrong way, that concerns about his professionalism and entitlement scared organizations off. Some teams felt he acted like he was already a star before proving anything at the NFL level. Others worried about the Deion Sanders factor, the larger-than-life father who comes with opinions, media attention, and expectations that could suffocate a young quarterback trying to find his way. The stigma of being primetime's son, which should have been an advantage, somehow became a liability. By the time the first round ended without Sanders being selected, the shock was palpable. Second round came and went. Third round, fourth round, all without the quarterback everyone expected to be a first-rounder hearing his name called. Finally, in the fifth round, at pick 146, the Cleveland Browns selected Shedeur Sanders, and the football world erupted. How does a potential top 5 pick fall that far? What did teams know that we didn't? And perhaps most importantly, why did the Browns, who had already selected Oregon quarterback Dillon Gabriel in the third round, just 2 rounds earlier, decide to take another quarterback? That decision would become ground zero for the controversy that's exploding right now.
Former Browns head coach Eric Mangini went on national television immediately after the pick and dropped a bombshell accusation. He claimed without hesitation that Browns owner Jimmy Haslam had personally forced general manager Andrew Berry to draft Shedeur Sanders, overruling his football people to make the selection himself. Mangini compared it to the Johnny Manziel disaster from 2014, when Haslam allegedly strong-armed the front office into drafting the troubled Texas A&M quarterback who flamed out spectacularly. The implication was clear. Jimmy Haslam was meddling again, making emotional decisions based on star power rather than football evaluation, and it was going to blow up in Cleveland's face just like it did with Manziel. The Browns went into damage control mode immediately. At training camp in late July, Jimmy Haslam faced reporters and pushed back hard against the narrative that he forced the Sanders pick. He said, and these were his exact words, that they have a good process, that if you had told him Friday night before the 5th round that they were going to pick Shedeur, he would have said that's not happening. He claimed they had conversations that morning and later that day with the right people involved, and at the end of the day, it was Andrew Berry's call. Andrew made the call to pick Shedeur, Haslam insisted. But here's the thing that nobody in Cleveland could ignore. There's video footage from draft day of Jimmy Haslam sitting in the draft room on day 3 when Sanders was announced. His presence there, his hands-on approach, the timing of everything, it all fed the narrative that this was Haslam's pick, not Berry's. Andrew Berry, the Browns' general manager who took over in 2020 alongside then-hired head coach Kevin Stefanski, tried to take ownership of the decision publicly. Berry is known as one of the sharpest young minds in the NFL, a Harvard graduate who became one of the youngest general managers in league history. His draft record had been strong, especially the 2025 class, which produced Defensive Rookie of the Year favorite Carson Schwessinger and several other immediate contributors. But the Shedeur Sanders pick looked different. It didn't fit the Browns' draft strategy of taking best player available. It created a redundant quarterback room with 4 signal callers competing for reps, and most tellingly, it came at a position where the Browns were already drowning in dysfunction thanks to the Deshaun Watson disaster. Let's talk about Deshaun Watson, because you cannot understand the Shedeur Sanders situation without understanding the albatross contract that's suffocating this entire organization. In March 2022, the Browns made what might be the single worst trade and contract decision in NFL history. They gave up 3 first-round picks and multiple other selections to the Houston Texans to acquire Watson, a quarterback facing over 20 lawsuits from women accusing him of sexual assault and misconduct during massage sessions. Then, in a move that shocked even the most cynical observers, Cleveland gave Watson a fully guaranteed 5-year, $230 million contract, the most guaranteed money ever given to any NFL player at that time. The contract was structured with a minimal first-year salary to minimize the impact of any potential suspension, which absolutely happened when the league suspended Watson for 11 games in 2022. Since joining the Browns, Deshaun Watson has been an unmitigated disaster. He's played in only 19 games across 3 seasons because of the suspension and multiple injuries, including shoulder surgery that cost him 8 games in 2023 and an Achilles tear in October 2024 that required 2 separate surgeries after he retore it. When he has been on the field, he's been one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the entire NFL, posting a 33.1 total QBR that would rank dead last among qualifying quarterbacks this season. The Browns have gone 3-16 in his starts. The offense looks broken whenever he's under center. And here's the kicker. The Browns cannot escape this contract. They structured it in a way that makes cutting him financially impossible. For 2026, Watson carries a cap hit of over $80.7 million, the largest salary cap number in NFL history. If they cut him before June 1st, they would incur a dead cap charge of $131.2 million. If they cut him after June 1st, they still save 0 money against the cap. The Browns are trapped, absolutely trapped, in a contract that will haunt them through 2029, when the final void years finally clear the books. So, when the 2025 season began, the Browns had this nightmare Watson contract, 2 rookie quarterbacks in Dillon Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, veteran Kenny Pickett acquired from Pittsburgh, and aging backup Joe Flacco, who had shown the previous year he could still play at a high level. It was a 4-man quarterback competition, something almost unheard of in the NFL, and it was messy from day one. Head coach Kevin Stefanski, a 2-time NFL Coach of the Year, who had signed a contract extension after his second award, was tasked with managing this circus. The decision ultimately came down to starting Flacco, which made sense given his performance the previous year, but it meant Gabriel and Sanders were stuck watching from the sideline, while Pickett was eventually traded to the Las Vegas Raiders for a 5th-round pick that the Browns didn't really need.
Joe Flacco started the first 4 games of the season, and the results were predictably bad. The Browns' offense looked stagnant. Flacco's 60.3 quarterback rating reflected an aging quarterback who couldn't move the offense consistently, and Cleveland started 1-3. Stefanski made the switch to rookie Dillon Gabriel, the third-round pick from Oregon, for the next several games. Gabriel showed flashes, but the Browns continued to lose. The offense ranked near the bottom of the league in every meaningful category. And then, in Week 10, everything changed. Stefanski handed over play-calling duties to offensive coordinator Tommy Rees, marking the second straight year Stefanski had given up his own play-calling responsibilities after doing the same with Ken Dorsey in 2025 before firing him. It was an admission that his offense wasn't working, that his schemes weren't producing points, and that his job was probably in serious jeopardy. Around this same time, Jimmy Haslam went public with comments that seemed to seal Stefanski's fate, while simultaneously putting enormous pressure on the organization to evaluate Shedeur Sanders. Haslam told reporters it was absolutely important to see what they had in both Sanders and Dillon Gabriel on the field before the 2026 NFL Draft, where Cleveland would hold 2 first-round picks, including one acquired in a trade with Jacksonville. The message was clear: play the rookies, figure out if either one is the answer, because the Browns needed to know whether to draft another quarterback with one of those premium picks. That statement essentially guaranteed Sanders would get his shot. In Week 10, Shedeur Sanders made his NFL debut against the New Orleans Saints, and the football world was watching. The results were mixed. Sanders showed the quick release, accuracy on short and intermediate routes, and pocket awareness that made him a first-round prospect in many people's eyes before the draft process went sideways. But he also looked like exactly what he was, a rookie quarterback playing behind a shaky offensive line with limited weapons, trying to operate in an offense that had been dysfunctional all season long. Over the next 7 games, Sanders would start 7 times, finishing with a 3-4 record. His statistics told the story of a young quarterback who was overwhelmed. 120 completions on 212 attempts for a 56.6 completion percentage, 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns against 10 interceptions, and a passer rating of 68.1. Among qualifying quarterbacks in the NFL, those numbers ranked dead last in almost every category. His 19.0 adjusted QBR was the worst in the league. The film showed a quarterback who made some impressive throws, but also forced balls into coverage, held the ball too long at times, and struggled to process NFL defensive speed consistently. But here's what nobody could ignore. The Browns went 3-4 in games Sanders started, compared to 1-8 in games he didn't. Those 3 wins came against Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Miami, all games where Sanders showed enough to give Cleveland hope that maybe, just maybe, there was something to build on. In the finale against Cincinnati, Sanders completed 64% of his passes for 240 yards and a touchdown in a 20-18 victory. He wasn't spectacular, but he was competent, and competent quarterback play had been sorely lacking in Cleveland for years. Analysts like former NFL quarterback Randall Cunningham, who pioneered the dual-threat quarterback position, came out publicly praising Sanders for his poise, maturity, and potential, despite the horrendous circumstances. Cunningham said the NFL isn't a video game, that building chemistry and developing as a quarterback takes time, especially when you're thrust into action as a 5th-round rookie on a 3-win team. He called Sanders built for the challenge and predicted that when Cleveland finally commits to him and builds around him, the league would see a dynamic star emerge. But Jimmy Haslam and Andrew Berry saw something different when they watched that tape. On Monday, January 5th, 2026, the Browns fired Kevin Stefanski after 6 seasons, ending a tenure that included 2 playoff appearances, 2 Coach of the Year awards, and a 45-56 overall record that fell below 500 after back-to-back disastrous seasons of 3-14 and 5-12. In a statement, owners Dee and Jimmy Haslam thanked Stefanski for his leadership, but said the results over the past 2 seasons had not been satisfactory and that a change at the head coaching position was necessary. Crucially, the statement also announced that general manager Andrew Berry would be retained and would lead the search for the team's 11th head coach since 1999, when the Browns returned to the NFL as an expansion franchise. When Barry and Haslam held their end-of-season press conference, the Shedeur Sanders questions came fast and furious, and their answers sent shockwaves through the organization. Haslam refused to talk about specific players when asked about Sanders, deflecting to Barry. But Barry's comments were devastating for Sanders' future. The general manager said that while Sanders made strides throughout the year, he's still a work in progress, like most young players. More importantly, Barry admitted that he couldn't sit there and tell anyone whether the solution at quarterback for 2026 is internal or external. He said quarterback is the most important position in sports, that they all know that, and that solidifying that position with the combination of internal options, external veteran options, and the draft remains to be seen. Priority number one is finding the leader for the organization, Barry emphasized, and how they accomplish that is still unclear.
Shedeur Sanders has not proven he's the answer. The Browns are going to explore every possible option at quarterback, and Sanders will have to compete not just with Deshaun Watson and potentially another veteran free agent signing, but also possibly with a first-round draft pick if the board falls right. Those comments were carefully worded to sound diplomatic, but make no mistake, they were a gut punch to Sanders and everyone who believed in his potential. The timing of this becomes even more critical when you understand the draft landscape. Going into the 2026 NFL Draft, the Browns hold the 6th overall pick, plus another first-rounder from Jacksonville. Originally, analysts believed this would be a loaded quarterback class, with Indiana's Fernando Mendoza and Oregon's Dante Moore both available as consensus top 5 prospects. Mendoza won the Heisman Trophy this season, leading the undefeated Hoosiers to the college football playoff finals. Moore transferred from UCLA to Oregon and showed NFL-caliber arm talent despite limited starting experience. Both were projected to go in the top 3 picks. But then, on Wednesday, January 14, 2026, Moore announced he's returning to Oregon for another season, removing himself from the draft entirely. That decision created a massive shakeup. Mendoza is now a -7,000 favorite to be the number 1 overall pick to the Las Vegas Raiders, with an implied probability over 98%. Alabama's Ty Simpson and Ole Miss's Trinidad Chambliss are the next quarterbacks projected, but both are viewed as developmental prospects with significant question marks. Here's where it gets interesting for Cleveland. The Browns sit at pick number 6, which means they're likely too far back to land Mendoza unless they trade up, something that would cost them multiple future first-round picks they can't afford to give up. Simpson and Chambliss might be available at 6, but are they better prospects than Shedeur Sanders? Most scouts would say no. Sanders, for all his struggles as a rookie, showed more polish, better anticipation, and superior ball placement than either of those quarterbacks in college. So the Browns are faced with a fascinating dilemma. Do they stick with Sanders and use their draft capital to surround him with offensive line help and weapons? Or do they reach for a quarterback at 6 just because they can, even if that quarterback isn't necessarily an upgrade over what they already have? Multiple NFL insiders have reported that sources within the Browns organization are preparing for Sanders to be their starter next season, hoping to build around him and get better results in his second year. But those same sources quickly added a massive caveat. What coaching candidate the Browns are able to attract is a big question hovering over the organization, and that coach will need to believe in Sanders as well as believe in the front office to deliver on offensive line and receiver acquisitions. Sources have said that a coach with options may not have the Browns high on his list specifically because of the quarterback uncertainty. Think about that for a second. The Browns' coaching search is being hampered by the Shedeur Sanders question. Quality candidates are looking at Cleveland and seeing a 5th-round rookie who posted the worst statistics in the league, a Deshaun Watson contract that won't go away, a roster that went 5-12, and an owner with a history of meddling, and they're choosing to interview elsewhere. The coaching search itself has become a 3-ring circus. Kevin Stefanski, despite being fired by Cleveland, immediately became one of the hottest names on the entire coaching carousel. Within days of his firing, Stefanski had interviewed or been requested to interview by 6 of the 9 current NFL openings, including the Miami Dolphins, Baltimore Ravens, Las Vegas Raiders, New York Giants, Tennessee Titans, and Atlanta Falcons. The Ravens' job, with Lamar Jackson already in place as an elite franchise quarterback, is widely considered the most attractive opening on the market, and Stefanski is a leading candidate. The fact that Cleveland's former coach is more desirable to other teams than Cleveland itself can attract tells you everything about the organization's current state. Meanwhile, in Berea, the Browns have interviewed a wide range of candidates. Jim Schwartz, the current defensive coordinator who transformed Cleveland's defense into one of the league's best units, is the favorite among many insiders. Schwartz has previous head coaching experience with the Detroit Lions from 2009 to 2013, where he went 29-51, but his defensive acumen is undeniable. He elevated Myles Garrett to back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards and turned rookie linebacker Carson Schwessinger into the favorite for Defensive Rookie of the Year. If Schwartz gets the job, he would need to hire an offensive coordinator capable of developing Shedeur Sanders, because Schwartz is a defensive guy through and through. Former Miami head coach Mike McDaniel has also been mentioned as a possibility, an offensive-minded coach who had success in Miami before being fired after 4 seasons. McDaniel's quirky, creative offensive approach could theoretically unlock something in Sanders. But does McDaniel want to tie his future to a 5th-round rookie on a franchise that's gone 8-26 the past 2 seasons?
The Deshaun Watson situation looms over all of this like a dark cloud that won't dissipate. League sources confirmed that the Browns plan to keep Watson on the roster for 2026, despite him not playing at all in 2025 after his double Achilles surgeries. Watson will earn $46 million in cash next season with that $80.7 million cap hit. The Browns will restructure his contract for a 4th time, converting most of that base salary into a signing bonus and spreading the cap hit across future void years. But even after the restructure, he'll still carry somewhere around $40 to $45 million against the 2026 cap. That's money that cannot be spent on offensive linemen, receivers, or defensive help. Cleveland is projected to be around $12 million over the salary cap heading into the offseason, and once they get to 51 players under contract, that number could balloon to nearly $30 million over, depending on how contracts are structured. The Watson restructure is mandatory just to become cap compliant, not to add talent. So picture the 2026 Browns quarterback room as it stands right now. Deshaun Watson making $46 million despite not having played in over a year and posting historically bad numbers when he was healthy. Dillon Gabriel, the 3rd-round rookie who started several games in 2025 but didn't distinguish himself enough to lock down the job. Shedeur Sanders, the controversial 5th-round pick whose statistics ranked last in the league but who won 3 of 7 starts and showed enough to make people wonder if he could develop with proper support, and potentially a mid-round draft pick or veteran free agent acquisition. That's 4 quarterbacks competing again, the same mess that defined 2025, except now with even more tension, because everyone knows that whoever wins the job needs to produce immediately or the entire regime could be blown up. Jimmy Haslam's role in all of this cannot be overstated. Since purchasing the Browns in 2012, the Haslam tenure has been awash with losing, off-field issues, and controversies. The team has churned through 10 head coaches in less than 15 years. The Deshaun Watson trade and contract has set the franchise back for years, maybe even a decade when you factor in the lost draft picks and cap implications. The Johnny Manziel disaster came because Haslam allegedly forced that pick against his scouts' recommendations, and now there are serious questions about whether Haslam forced the Shedeur Sanders pick the same way, overruling his football people to chase the star power of Deion Sanders. During his July press conference, Haslam poked fun at himself when asked what he's learned as an owner, quipping that it doesn't look like very much. That self-deprecating humor doesn't erase the damage, though. The franchise is a laughingstock, a place where careers go to die, and the owner's meddling is a major reason why. Here's where the Shedeur Sanders situation takes on an even darker tone. Multiple analysts and insiders have openly speculated that ownership will come up with every excuse to cut Sanders loose and move on, despite having invested a draft pick in him. The theory goes like this. If Sanders was truly Andrew Barry's guy, then Barry would be publicly backing him to the hilt right now. Instead, Barry is hedging, saying the solution might be external, talking about priority number one being finding the leader of the organization. That language suggests Sanders isn't viewed internally as that leader. If Sanders wasn't Barry's pick, but rather Haslam's forced pick, then Barry has every incentive to prove Haslam wrong by finding someone else, allowing Barry to say, "I told you so," and cement his own power within the organization. It's palace intrigue, organizational politics playing out at the expense of a 25-year-old quarterback who did nothing wrong except fall in the draft and play for a dysfunctional franchise. The irony of all this is almost painful. Shedeur Sanders could have been a first-round pick for multiple teams if the pre-draft process had gone differently. Teams like the Titans, who took quarterback Cam Ward first overall in 2025, could have used a veteran or developmental quarterback for a year while building the roster. The Giants, Panthers, Raiders, any of them could have taken Sanders in round one and given him the resources and support structure that first-round picks receive. Instead, he falls to the fifth round because of concerns about his personality, his father's influence, and scouts overthinking the evaluation. And then he lands with the most dysfunctional franchise in football, where he's set up to fail from day one. He plays behind a bottom-5 offensive line, throws to receivers who can't get separation, operates in a scheme that was so broken the head coach gave up play calling twice in 2 years, and gets judged against standards that are impossible to meet in that environment. Randall Cunningham, the former NFL quarterback and pioneer of the dual threat position, spoke passionately about the unfair treatment Sanders has received. Cunningham said the constant dissection of every pass and every play, the social media mob throwing salt on the game at every opportunity, refusing to acknowledge the potential Sanders displayed in his 7 starts, it's all part of a narrative designed to tear him down. Cunningham noted the terrible weather conditions Sanders played in during most of his starts, the fact that Cleveland was essentially tanking all season, which meant the supporting cast was minimal, and yet Sanders still managed to win 3 games and show legitimate NFL traits. Cunningham praised Sanders' confidence, saying that for some quarterbacks it's okay to be confident, but Sanders' confidence gets labeled as arrogance or cockiness instead of being recognized for what it is, belief in himself, because he's put the work in. The double standard is obvious to anyone paying attention, Cunningham argued, and it comes down to Sanders being Deion's son and having a level of swag that makes some people uncomfortable.
The question now is what happens next, and depending on who you believe, the answer ranges from Sanders getting a legitimate chance to compete for the starting job to Sanders being quietly pushed aside in favor of a veteran or draft pick. If the Browns hire an offensive-minded head coach like Mike McDaniel or Clint Kubiak or one of the other candidates being mentioned, that coach might look at Sanders' tape and see enough to believe he can develop into something special with proper coaching and scheme fit. If the Browns hire a defensive-minded coach like Jim Schwartz, that coach will delegate the offense to his coordinator, and it'll be up to that coordinator to evaluate whether Sanders is worth building around. If the Browns trade up in the draft to get Fernando Mendoza or reach on Ty Simpson at 6, then Sanders becomes a backup or trade asset, ending his Cleveland tenure before it truly began. If the Browns sign a veteran like Mac Jones or Malik Willis, or even Kyler Murray if the Cardinals make him available, then Sanders is competing in training camp, but probably isn't winning that competition against established NFL players. The financial realities cannot be ignored either. Sanders is on a 5th-round rookie contract, which means he's making peanuts compared to every other quarterback option available. His cap hit for 2026 is minimal, less than $1 million, which makes him extremely cost-effective if he can play anywhere close to league average. In a salary cap era where every dollar matters, and the Browns are already strapped because of the Watson disaster, having a cheap quarterback option who can manage games and make plays occasionally is incredibly valuable. But cheap only matters if he's good enough to start, and the statistics from his rookie season suggest he's not ready for that burden.
56.6 completion percentage and 10 interceptions in 7 games is not sustainable. The eye test showed a quarterback with potential, but potential doesn't win games in the NFL. Production does, and Sanders didn't produce at an acceptable level. Contrast Sanders' situation with other young quarterbacks around the league. Caleb Williams, the first overall pick for the Chicago Bears in 2024, struggled mightily as a rookie, but the Bears never wavered in their commitment to him because he was their guy, their investment, their future. Drake May with the Patriots showed flashes, and New England is building around him. Bo Nix in Denver had ups and downs, but the Broncos stuck with him and he improved dramatically. Jaden Daniels with Washington was stellar before injuries derailed his season. All of these quarterbacks were first-round picks with massive expectations and organizational commitment. Sanders is a fifth-round pick with question marks about whether the owner forced the selection, playing for a franchise with no patience, no stability, and no clear plan. The developmental runway he needs simply doesn't exist in Cleveland. There's also the Deion Sanders factor to consider, and it's impossible to separate Shedeur from his father's shadow. Deion, now the head coach at Colorado, has been relatively quiet during Shedeur's rookie season, but everyone knows prime time is watching, evaluating, and forming opinions. If Shedeur gets benched or cut, Deion will almost certainly make his displeasure known, whether through social media, media interviews, or public statements. That creates additional pressure on the Browns organization that they absolutely do not need. Jimmy Haslam is already dealing with criticism from every angle. The last thing he wants is Deion Sanders calling out his franchise on national television for mishandling his son. But at the same time, the Browns cannot make roster decisions based on appeasing Deion Sanders. They have to do what's best for winning football games, and if that means moving on from Shedeur, then that's what they'll do, regardless of the blowback. The parallels to the Johnny Manziel situation are hard to ignore, and Browns fans are understandably nervous that history is repeating itself. Manziel was a Heisman Trophy winner and first-round pick in 2014, taken with the 22nd overall selection after reports that Haslam pushed for the pick despite concerns from scouts. Manziel flamed out spectacularly, struggling with addiction, off-field issues, and an inability to translate his college success to the NFL level. He started 8 games across 2 seasons, going 2-6 before being released. The pick is widely regarded as one of the worst first-round mistakes in Browns history, and it happened because ownership overruled football people. If the Shedeur Sanders pick was another example of Haslam forcing his will against his scouts' recommendations, and if Sanders ultimately fails to develop into a starter, then the Browns have repeated the exact same mistake with the exact same owner interfering again.
General Manager Andrew Berry finds himself in an impossible position. If Sanders succeeds, Berry gets no credit because everyone will assume Haslam forced the pick. If Sanders fails, Berry will get blamed for not developing him properly, even if Haslam did force the pick. Berry is a brilliant executive who has built strong rosters and made smart decisions more often than not, but the Watson contract and the Sanders pick are 2 massive anchors around his neck. His job is probably safe for now, given the Haslam statement that he'll lead the coaching search, but another disastrous season in 2026 and even Berry's job security could evaporate. He's tied his future to Shedeur Sanders whether he wanted to or not, and that's a terrifying position to be in when you're a general manager in the NFL. The Browns' defense is actually in excellent shape, which makes the offensive struggles and quarterback chaos even more frustrating. Mason Graham, the defensive tackle taken 5th overall in 2025 after Cleveland traded down from 2 with Jacksonville, has been solid. Carson Schwessinger is a Defensive Rookie of the Year favorite. Myles Garrett is arguably the best defensive player in football. Denzel Ward is a shutdown corner when healthy. The pieces are there to field an elite defense in 2026, which means if the Browns can just figure out the offense and get competent quarterback play, they could compete for a playoff spot even in the tough AFC North. But competent quarterback play has been the Browns' white whale for decades, and Shedeur Sanders hasn't proven he can provide that.
Another wrinkle in this whole saga is the coaching carousel and how it affects Sanders. Kevin Stefanski is out interviewing for jobs with teams that have better quarterback situations than Cleveland. If Stefanski lands in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson, he instantly has a top 5 quarterback in football. If he goes to the Dolphins, he'll have Tua Tagovailoa or potentially draft capital to trade up for a quarterback. If he goes to Tennessee, he has young star Cam Ward. Every one of those situations is more appealing than going back to Cleveland and trying to fix Shedeur Sanders, which tells you how the league views Sanders' prospects right now. Coaches with options are choosing to go elsewhere, and the coaches Cleveland can attract are either retreads looking for second chances or first-time coordinators hoping to prove themselves. Neither scenario is ideal for developing a young quarterback who desperately needs consistency, quality coaching, and a system that fits his skill set. The free agency market doesn't offer much help either. The top quarterbacks available in free agency include guys like Jameis Winston, Mac Jones, and Malik Willis, all of whom have significant flaws, but could be seen as veteran placeholders while Sanders develops or while the Browns figure out their long-term plan. None of them are franchise quarterbacks, which means Cleveland would essentially be punting on the 2026 season if they go that route. The trade market is equally thin. Kyler Murray might be available if the Arizona Cardinals decide to move on, but his contract is massive and comes with its own set of concerns about height, injuries, and inconsistency. The New Orleans Saints might shop Derek Carr, but he's aging and expensive. There simply aren't great options out there, which in theory should push the Browns toward giving Shedeur Sanders every opportunity to prove himself. But the reporting suggests that's not happening. Insider after insider has said the Browns are preparing for Sanders to start, but only if nothing better comes along. That's damning with faint praise. It means Sanders is the fallback option, not the preferred option. It means the organization doesn't believe in him as the long-term answer. And it means Sanders is going into year 2 already fighting for his job before a single snap of training camp has happened. How is a young quarterback supposed to develop with confidence and aggressiveness when he knows the organization is actively trying to replace him?
Jimmy Haslam's bombshell isn't just one statement or one decision. It's the accumulation of everything. The forced draft pick that everyone suspects but nobody can prove, the refusal to commit to Sanders publicly, the coaching search being hampered by quarterback uncertainty, the exploration of every possible alternative rather than building around the rookie, the Watson contract making it impossible to add talent around whoever the quarterback is, and the organizational dysfunction that's defined the Browns for over a decade. All of it is coming to a head right now, and Shedeur Sanders is caught in the middle of a storm he didn't create. The next few weeks will be critical. The Browns will hire a new head coach, and that coach will immediately face questions about the quarterback situation. If the coach is an offensive guy, he'll be expected to fix Sanders or bring in his own quarterback. If the coach is a defensive guy, his offensive coordinator will face those same questions. The Combine in late February will give scouts another look at this year's quarterback class, and teams will finalize their draft boards. Free agency opens in mid-March, which is when veteran quarterbacks might become available, and the Browns could make a move. The draft happens in late April, which is the final opportunity to add a quarterback if Cleveland decides Sanders isn't the answer. Every one of those dates represents another chance for the Browns to move on from Shedeur Sanders, and based on the reporting and the tone of Andrew Berry's comments, it sure seems like they're preparing to do exactly that. For Shedeur Sanders personally, this has to be devastating. He went from projected first-rounder to fifth-round pick, which was a massive hit to his ego and his earning potential. He got thrown into action as a rookie on a terrible team and asked to play hero ball to save a lost season. He won 3 games, which is more than most people expected, showed enough on tape to justify further development, and conducted himself with professionalism and maturity despite the chaos around him. And now he's being told that it might not be enough, that the organization is looking for better options, that he might be watching from the sideline again in year 2. How does a young quarterback maintain confidence and belief when the team that drafted him is already trying to replace him?
The broader implications for the Browns organization are staggering. If they move on from Sanders and draft another quarterback, they'll have spent 3 first-round picks on quarterbacks in the past 5 years when you count the Watson trade package. That's Baker Mayfield in 2018, the 3 firsts for Watson in 2022, and now another first for a quarterback.